In today's episode of Children of Heroes, we traveled about 4.5 hours north from London to Carlton, Miniet, where we interviewed Ellen Hoida, granddaughter of Sgt. Ervín Hoida.
Thank you for participating in our project Children of Heroes. Your grandfather Ervín served as a soldier during the Second World War. In fact, I had the privilege talking to him in one of our previous episodes. Did you realize that he was a war hero when you grew up?
So the honest answer to that is no. When we were really young, he didn't really speak about it a great deal. We did know because my father explained about how he was obviously from the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia and how they had to escape as Jewish people during the war and how he had fought in the war. But we didn't really know. To us, he was just a normal grandfather. If you'd asked him then, I don't think he would have described himself as a war hero either.
No, já nejsem žádná hrdina, já jsem dělal, co jsem musel dělat. Každý jiný by to taky dělal.
He just thought of himself as a normal, regular guy. If you ever talked about him serving, he thought that was his duty, that was something you just had to do, and he just sort of got on with it, and he just thought he was doing just what every other normal guy would do, really. I think it was only really because he lived to such a great age, once he became over 100 and then in the last couple of years was sort of recognised by yourselves at the embassy, that actually he kind of became more prominent and was obviously awarded medals and things like that, that then his story became more sort of known about and was more sort of celebrated then. But when we were children, he was just a normal grandfather really to us, I would say.
And did he talk about his experiences from the war?
When we were small, no, not really. Mostly we found out about his story from talking to my father, who did know a certain amount about it, so he must have spoken, previously to people. After my grandmother, Isabel, his first wife, died in 1997, he did make an audio recording of some of his wartime experiences, and that was in 1998, and that was in audio form, and we have a recording of that on the computer now, and that's where we really found out much more detail about some of the stories about what had happened to him and how they'd escaped from Czechoslovakia, some of the things that he'd done and things like that.
What was his favourite story?
I think the thing that stands out most to me from when I was listening to these audio diaries really were some of the more, I don't know whether to call it sort of traumatic, but some of the more sort of difficult things that he experienced as a soldier, really. It was all surrounding an episode when they were in France and they had to cross the river Loire near Gien, and the bridge had got blown up earlier than it was supposed to, and they were supposed to cross this bridge, but of course they couldn't cross the bridge because it had been blown up.
Zrovna k řece řekli nám, že musíme tam být v 6 hodin ráno, protože ty Francouzi vyhodí ten most, než ti Němci tam přijdou. Tak bylo v 5 hodin ráno, když jsme slyšeli ten buch a viděl si hodinu předtím. Když jsme tam přišli, tak byla řeka a žádný most. Tak ty boty a pušky šly do ledě a my jsme plavali přes tu řeku. A když jsme plavali, přišli ty letadla, začali nás bombardovat letadlem zase. Bylo tam pár mrtvých Francouzů, tak jsem si půjčil boty od jednoho a pušky od jednoho. A potom jsme šli ještě takových 20 kilometrů pěšky ještě, až jsme šli na vlak. A s vlakem jsme jeli k Středozemnímu moři.
So some of them had to take their clothes off and swim across the river with these 2 little rowing boats, put all their clothes and their belongings into these little boats, but then they came under fire when they were crossing the river. So everything was destroyed, all their clothes, I think their rifles as well probably. So they sort of ran into some buildings and hid in the cellars. The opposing forces had disappeared. Obviously they'd survived the attack, but they had no clothes and no boots. So somewhat traumatically, he describes in this audio thing how he had to go to a deceased French soldier, take the clothes and boots off a deceased soldier, and that's what he had to then wear and sort of going forwards. It really brought it home what it was like being a soldier and fighting in the war, actually. It's all very well having these lovely sort of heroic stories, but actually some of it's quite traumatic.
Your father was a well-known painter. Was it something he wanted to do in the very beginning, and what was the inspiration for his paintings?
His mother did study art at college, so there must have been some influence there. He did come from a very working class background in Birkenhead on the Wirral, and I don't think he had a huge amount of exposure to art through coming from a working class family, but he did describe when he was about 11, I think, being taken to the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool to see a Van Gogh exhibition, and I think that must have been quite a big moment for him. And also I know that when he was 14 he went to visit Bruno, who was Ervín's brother, in Paris, and was definitely taken to some art galleries there, so they were definitely early influences of his. When he left school, he actually studied landscape architecture first and went to work in London as a landscape architect for a couple of years, but I'm presuming that he must have decided that wasn't for him, because after that he left and went to study art at Goldsmiths College in London, and that's really where he got into painting and abstract art through his studies in London, I think.
Is this his painting?
It is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's our favourite one, yeah.
You yourself studied medicine and became a GP. Do you like your job?
I absolutely do like my job. It's quite challenging at the moment, I would say. The NHS at the moment is under a lot of pressure, so I'd say it's challenging for both patients in terms of accessing appropriate healthcare, but that also means it's quite challenging for a lot of the staff, not just doctors, working in the NHS.
You work in a very busy practice, and you have worked with asylum seekers and refugees.
We have 20,000 patients in our practice in Middlesbrough. So it's a big teaching practice, so we have medical students and also doctors training to be GPs as well at the practice. Quite a lot of our patients in Middlesbrough, English isn't their first language. So although our current practice doesn't specifically look after asylum seekers and refugees, we do have those as our patients, but I have previously, a few years ago, worked in a practice just dedicated to looking after the health of asylum seekers and refugees. My main hobbies are music. I play the violin and I play the piano. I play in an orchestra locally in Ripon every week, and we do concerts 2 or 3 times a year. It's an amateur orchestra, I have to say, not a professional orchestra, obviously. And I'm also naturally interested in art. So if we're on holiday anywhere in a city, we always go to the art gallery and things like that. Outside of music and art, I would say our main hobbies as a family are hill walking. So a lot of our holidays are based on going to places with mountains or good coastlines, so we love a good hike.
Because of the Second World War, your family spread across several continents. Could you see them often?
So we don't see them that often, I have to say. So Ervín was one of 3 brothers. Bruno ended up in France and Walter ended up in Israel. This was the telegram that Ervín's parents sent approving him to get married to Isabel. I think to actually have this telegram's amazing. I think that might be Isabel's actually. Yeah, but I think it might actually be, yeah, so that's, oh my goodness, so yeah, so she becomes Hoidova, which... So we had a Czech au pair, because I mentioned we had au pairs when the children are small. We had au pairs from all different countries, but the Czech one, she was here and that was great, that was really nice. I can't believe how fortunate we are that somebody's shown this level of interest. It's a dream to have something like this. You've got the details of absolutely everything. Obviously a lot of it is about his military life. Honestly, he generally really didn't actually talk about a lot of these things at all. I don't know if he just didn't want to think about it. It's difficult to know, isn't it, really? I do remember when Isabel and Ervín had their golden wedding anniversary, all the family came over to stay with us to celebrate that, and they came from Israel, also from America, where Walter's daughter Hannah ended up. That was great. And again, when it was Ervín's 100th birthday, all the family also came over from the different parts of the world. I found a picture of Ervín with my first child. It's nothing worse than other people's wedding photos, but I'm going to show you because at my wedding, so there's a photo with my father, me, and obviously my grandfather, but the wedding was in a C of E church, and my father is a staunch atheist, and he absolutely point blank refused to walk me down the aisle when we got married. He said, I don't believe it, I'm not doing this. So Ervín, despite the fact he's from a Jewish background, said, I'll do it. He was a total pragmatist. didn't care what anybody thought or said, and that was just a really sort of lovely thing for him to do. It's a really special memory of him, really. And you can see, like, he's there, obviously my husband and myself, the best man, and Ervín at our wedding in the church. We have been to Israel to visit Giora and Ada, that's Walter's son and his wife. In fact, we went about 3 or 4 years ago, must have been just before COVID, I think, and took the 4 boys on holiday there, and that was an amazing holiday. That was absolutely great to go and see them as family. And I think if you're visiting a country with family, you just see a completely different side to the country, and you experience it in a different way that you would do as a tourist. So that was really, really great opportunity that we had. We keep in touch, but the realities of actually physically seeing people is not so often, I would say. So we moved to this area about 20 years ago, and we're centred around the town of Thirsk, which is a lovely market town in North Yorkshire. Has everything that we need. Hello, Roscoff. We were living in a lovely old farmhouse about 10 years ago, which is beautiful, 200 years old, but it's very large, and all old houses have problems with them eventually. So we applied for planning permission and had an architect design a brand new house just built for ourselves. So we built this house 3 years ago, and it's just exactly how we want it. We've got a music room, we've got a table tennis room, the kids have their own bedrooms, and we've got this beautiful outlet with the garden, and we're planting some woods, and hopefully it won't be a forest, but some mixed trees with pine trees and things like that. And my husband's made a pond down the bottom of the field and things like that. So it's a great space for us here, really. I think they're just very frightened, but you can see them all just running around, little baby chicks. Chicks make a great video, but so.
And do you think that your grandfather's Czech roots have had a significant influence on your life?
Absolutely. I mean, in particular, just because he lived to such a long age, that meant we've known him I've known him all my life, but also it's enabled my children to get to know him as well. And most people don't necessarily have the opportunity to know their great-grandfather. And I think lots of people know about different stories in their history, and they hear about people who did this and did that. But if you've actually met the person, it brings it to life. You know, actually being able to talk to them, hear about what happened. So yeah, it's really important to me. I mean, so important, when I got married, I've kept my maiden name, and that is my name. It's not just my professional name, that is my name. My name's Ellen Hoida, and I don't use my married name because it's just such an important part to me of my sort of identity and history, really.